Behind your casual web surfing is an intricate shadow world of spies following your every move. Nearly every company you can think of uses web tracking technology to learn about and monetize your behavior and preferences. So in today's video, we will find out how website tracking works and how anti-tracking tools can prevent these sneaky spies from spying on you. Web tracking is the collection and sharing of information about an individual's activity on the internet, what they do online, and how they go about doing it. Web tracking or internet tracking gives companies a fuller understanding of your preferences, allowing them to personalize their content accordingly. Companies use a variety of software tools like website trackers, beacons, and other tracking files to observe how you interact with their websites, a process known as website visitor tracking, and to follow you around the internet to see what else you're doing. And just what are these tracking files? They're often referred to as cookies. We'll learn more about them in a bit. Some people use the terms website tracking and web tracking interchangeably, but they're not exactly the same. In contrast to how we've just defined web tracking, website tracking is simply the practice of monitoring how a website changes over time. Browser tracking and other techniques described in this video are all examples of web tracking. Some companies handle data collection themselves, while data brokers are companies dedicated to compiling and selling data for other companies to use. First-party tracking is performed by the website you're visiting. Website tracking is of this type monitors your behavior to remember your preferences, such as the type of content you usually prefer, as well as language settings, location, and other information you share. Generally, there's not much to worry about with first-party tracking of your preferences, since you probably want the sites you visit frequently to load in your preferred language and so forth. The situation gets murkier if first-party sites sell access to your data to marketers. Third-party tracking happens when parties other than the website you're using also track your activity there. For example, you may visit a news site to read their content without realizing that the site also loads a bunch of third-party cookies that track your behavior, both on their site as well as other sites you may visit in the future. That's why the definition of a third-party website includes all the websites that can also see what you're doing on other sites. Third-party behavior tracking is often used to help advertisers tailor their ads to your implied preferences. Fourth-party cookies are even further removed from the website that's putting them on your browser, such as when ad networks use cookies that originate from other providers. Later on, we'll look more deeply at why companies track you across the internet and what they do with the information they glean. Now that we know these sites are following your every move, a question arises: how do websites track you around the internet? Most website user tracking can be sorted into a few broad categories based on how the tracing works. Let's take a closer look at some of the most widely used web trackers and website tracking systems. IP address tracking. Your IP address is a series of numbers that identifies your device on the internet. Every device online, not just your computer, phone, or router, but also the servers that power the websites and services you use, has an IP address. IP addresses are an integral component in the structure of the internet because they ensure that web traffic gets delivered where it's meant to go. Many network admins use IP tracking software to monitor the devices connected to their networks. Your school or company likely has such a system in place. Since your IP address indicates your general physical location, websites use IP tracking to keep tabs on where their visitors are coming from. They can also use IP addresses to identify behavior patterns and determine whether or not repeat visits originate from the same individual. These sorts of insights can be further used to predict your preferences, though cookies are far more efficient for that. More on those next. By using web beacons, another tracking tool, companies can see the IP addresses of people who have opened their emails. That's one way that companies can judge the efficacy of their email marketing campaigns. IP tracking works only if your IP address is visible. If you hide your IP address with a proxy or a VPN, this tracking method will be much less effective against you. Cookies are perhaps the most well-known type of browser tracking. A cookie is a tiny snippet of code that gets stored in your browser when you visit a website that uses them. First-party cookies are created by the website you're visiting, and they mostly help that site remember what you like and what you're doing. For example, when you're shopping online and add an item to your cart, a session cookie that tells the e-commerce website to remember that you've done so. Without a cookie, you wouldn't be able to move easily through the different checkout screens to enter your shipping info, payment details, and so on, because the site would lose track of your items as soon as you click through to the next page. A first-party persistent cookie saves you your longer-term preferences, such as the time zone you live in and your login credentials. In most cases, first-party cookies are necessary for site functionality, or at least helpful in improving your experience on the website. Third-party cookies are created by parties other than the website you're visiting. These are tracking cookies that follow you as you browse from one website to the next. Website analytics and advertising are two of the primary uses for tracking cookies. In fact, one recent study found that 99% of all cookies are tracking and ad cookies. Some browsers can block third-party cookies, and any that don't should give you the option to enable or disable cookies within the settings. Websites and emails use web beacons, often in the form of a single pixel transparent graphic image, to log user behavior. These beacons are like tiny hidden cameras. They're invisible and they monitor what you're doing. On websites, beacons work like cookies in that they're used to track users for website analytics and advertising purposes. These beacons monitor how you use a page or navigate through a series of pages, and companies use this information to tailor their services and offering to your behavior and preferences. The Facebook Pixel is a ubiquitous web beacon that equips site owners with massive amounts of data to use in Facebook ad campaigns. By tracking when and how often you shop and how much you buy, the Facebook Pixel lets advertisers target ads to people most likely to buy again. They can also target people with similar behavior and preferences as their existing customers. This is referred to as a lookalike audience. The Pixel even knows if you saw a Facebook ad on one device but switched to another to visit the advertiser's website, or if you added an item to your shopping cart but then decided not to buy. Beacons also facilitate IP address tracking in emails. When you open an email containing an embedded beacon, that beacon will log the exact time and date at which you did so, as well as your IP address. These beacons can also tell if and when you click any links or download any attachments in the email. We have reached the end of part 1, guys. Make sure to stay tuned for part 2, which will go even further into detail about even more advanced methods of web tracking that most people are not aware of. We'll see you in the next one.